Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside. Well, I'm not anywhere cold. I'm in California. I got to admit to the rest of you who are suffering in Texas and all over the country in this cold storm called Uri. Isn't that a good name for a storm? It's got a terrible effect. It's killed a couple of dozen people. Very tragic story last night of a mom and a child who attempted to heat themselves in a car and died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And I am reminded of stories like that over all the years when I was up in New England and in Ohio. That always seems to be something that people need to be reminded of. So we extend our thoughts and prayers to all of you who are suffering, and many of you are. And to those of you who are mildly discomforted, welcome to our world growing up in Ohio. 1-800-520-1234. Now, yesterday, our phones were frozen. I actually appealed for calls on the question of Ted Lasso and whether or not anyone had watched Ted Lasso in this audience, because only Adam among the Hugh Hewitt team had watched Ted Lasso, and it turned out that no one called, which is a bit of a suspicion since our lines are almost always full. So we're checking them out again this morning, 1-800-520-1234 if you've watched Ted Lasso. But better yet, if you've watched Ted Lasso and Big Sky, I would like you to call. Because I informed you yesterday that Big Sky was not, in fact, about Joe Pickett, but was a fact about the highway. And the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt lasted 10 minutes and I lasted 12, because The Highway is the scariest book I've ever read. And I don't need to see the miniseries about the highway. David Kelly produced and C.J. Box, executive producer, no matter how many millions of you watch it. So I am hoping that my audience is exactly what I think it is, and that you are Ted Lasso watchers and not Big Sky watchers. But hopefully you're watchers of both, and you can tell me that Ted Lasso, like I suspect, is actually the thing you need in your life. I also got a second terrible surprise yesterday before I do the news of the day and the rundown, and it's this, if you're watching on YouTube. No phones are ringing, are they? 1-800-520-1234. Not even the drunks in Long Beach. People are just coming home. They're not even calling. The people are just walking into the bar in Hawaii aren't calling. So we know, we have a screener. We have two screeners, in fact, because usually if I say the lines are open, the first couple of people who can lurch to the phone in their beery gaze and call me about their girlfriend are the first people we hear from in the morning. But we'll see. I hold in my hand the sound effect. Do you know what this is, Dwayne?
Looks like Rummy Cub.
That's it. This was sent to me yesterday, and I treat it like I treat every other package that is sent to me with no markings on it. Could be dangerous.
Did you soak it in water?
I don't know what to do with this. The note comes along with a recommendation that it is indeed everything I've been told, and it's addictive and wonderful and terrific. Have you played it?
I think, yeah, when I was like 8.
Well, I've never heard of it before.
Oh, it's a game.
Well, yeah, it's not a bomb.
It's a real game.
Well, after Big Sky, a truck is not a truck, is it?
I don't know how that follows.
There you go.
Counselor.
That's why I'm here and you're there. David in Tennessee. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Hugh. How you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah, I was just calling. My wife and I actually binge-watched Ted Lasso this past weekend.
You did, too. That's what the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did. And your report?
I got to say, that's usually more my style of comedy, but my wife was the one who insisted we watch it. I was skeptical, but it was A+. Give it an
A+. And why is that?
I played soccer growing up, and so I had the soccer love at heart, but just the comedy, I got to say the female comedy throughout it was pretty amazing. It was just great casting, just loved it, hilarious.
And uplifting, right? Inspiring.
It was.
It
made you want to go to work and have a positive attitude, for sure.
That's exactly. And I don't know anything from soccer. I'm like Ted. I know less about soccer than Ted does. But well said, David. Thank you. Robert in Grand Junction. Hey, Robert. Oh, Robert went away. Ben, he was not. Okay, I'm sorry. We didn't mean that, Robert. Let me run through the rundown while we're waiting here for Ben to catch up with it. We've got a Republican schism. All right, President Trump has never led an attack since I followed him, which is since 2015. So it's been 6 years now. Has never not answered an attack. And Mitch McConnell took the bark off of him at the end of the impeachment acquittal. And so yesterday, President Trump fired off a scathing 2-page letter. Understand that the leader, who is the leader of the Republican Party in power right now, he's the most powerful Republican in America, and he's going to win the Senate back, is defending himself and Congress, and he's not going to be removed by the caucus. The caucus know he's the best leader that the Republicans have had in my lifetime, and is a wise, wise guy. And Donald Trump has not lost his grip on a majority of the party base. And so this is like a clash of the titans. You know, it's Godzilla versus, or it's Predator versus Alien, right? And I'm not going to tell you which one is which. But for those of you who are worrying, let me just give you some names. Eisenhower and Taft. Ike and Nixon versus Joe McCarthy. Ford versus Reagan. Reagan versus Bush. McCain versus Romney. Huckabee versus Romney. All this stuff that people are pronouncing the end of the world because two big Republican names are fighting with each other, forget it. It just means you don't know anything about modern politics. And if you have been sheep dip in modern politics like I have, and I've been in the game since 74. My first campaign was 74 when Paul Cronin got wiped out in the Watergate baby election, congressman from Massachusetts, and there's never not been a cycle that I didn't know about every race and everything that mattered. This is nothing, as they say in Wag the Dog. In fact, the original great feud among conservatives was when Bobby Peel split the British Conservative Party in 1832 over the Corn Laws. So I go way back in Conservative Party splits. And here is the book that I talked about with Andrew Roberts last week, Salisbury. And he and Disraeli, in 1867, when the conservative minority ministry in England fell apart, they could have killed each other walking on the street. Although Salisbury then, Cecil, Robert Cecil, before he was elevated to the House of Lords, he just thought that Disraeli was a lying, cheating, backstabbing, absolutely not to be trusted everything. And then they were best friends and pals throughout the Disraeli triumphal ministry. And then Salisbury went on to be Prime Minister of Great Britain for 3 terms. Point being, when making up is the difference between getting back into power and not getting back into power, politicians make up. Also came across just a great apropos of nothing. This is nothing. This is nothing. And we have a lot of Democrats who pretend to be journalists writing it up like it's the end of the Republican Party. This is nothing. But while I was preparing a column for the Post 2 weeks ago, I was rereading Salisbury. And I marked down, just read to people this. In 1875, there is war in the Balkans, which actually you could use any date for war in the Balkans. And Disraeli sends his best friend this note. Foreign affairs are in an unintelligible condition. Serbia's senseless rashness is as mysterious as Turkey's vitality. Turkey, a despotism without a despot, is governed absolutely by a set of officials who have no title to their places except that they were appointed by the man they murdered, is fighting a very costly war without money and without credit, and is maintaining with success a desperate struggle for national existence without the aid of a single man of conspicuous ability, against the hatred of more than half of her subjects and against the growing ill will of the great part of Europe. I shall begin soon to believe in the Hindu legend that the elephant which bore the world stood on the tortoise, and that the tortoise stood on nothing in particular. Now, when you've figured that out, what he says and its applicability, you can come back and listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans and 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. Mm-hmm. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, mm-hmm. and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry. You think that's not a bad decision? The EDD, oops, we handed out $30 billion of money we shouldn't have. You think that's bad management? Schools not reopening. The list and reasons to recall Gavin, we have about 64 on our website, and we still couldn't fill it up, but recallgavin2020.com is long and endless. The reality is California has a bad governor making bad decisions, sending us in a bad direction. For those of us that live out here, mm-hmm. Our state's on fire, our power goes out, our taxes are too high.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
We'll move on to what is the main event at the moment, which is the radicalism of the Biden agenda, pushing a lot of stuff out unilaterally and also pushing a massive stimulus. You know, we all can agree, I think we need some more COVID relief, but it's much, much bigger than that, and has a massive national minimum wage increase that would hammer the job market at a time when we should be doing everything to support it.
It is almost as if, and I hesitate to say it because it doesn't sound sane, but it's almost as if they are trying to destroy the economy. It's so bizarre. Would you give them enough credit to say that they're not trying to bring some kind of socialism or big government dependence to us via these strange means? Because that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, that is what they're trying to do. I mean, it's based on a misbegotten but sincere view of what the country should be in their minds and how the economy works. But if you get closer to where you are in the world than where I am at the moment, a place like Alabama, the median wage is $15 an hour. That means, I'm not a statistics guy, but half of people make less than that.
Welcome back, America. Does that describe your life right now? It does look that way across the United States. Cold, cold winter. Big story yesterday, by the way. This is cold news for lawyers everywhere. A hacker claims to have stolen files belonging to the law firm of Jones Day in the Wall Street Journal. And the reason I bring this up, there is no secret in America that is unclassified that does not exist in the drawers and the storage of law firms. And I've always wondered when hackers would get around to law firms, because they can make a fortune if they get in there and find who's merging with whom and who's suing whom and who's got the goods on this or that. And so when I read that, I said, bad, very bad news. I am retired. I don't have to worry about that. But if I was still a partner in any firm in which I was a partner, I'd be in the managing firm. I was a managing partner for a lot of years, and I know my partners would be in my office saying, what are we doing about this? Because we're going to get sued if this stuff gets out. And meanwhile, there's a huge incentive for hackers to break in. Bad, very bad news. Let me check the markets, brought to you by Birch Gold. And this is a big day for me to check Birch Gold for you. And you can get the Birch Gold at hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Gold has dropped below 1,800 in a counterintuitive move for a reason I will tell you in a second. But it's down at 1787, 1788 right now, an ounce, which is usually, it's been up to 2,000. It's down 25% from its height. Again, you don't buy gold to make money. You buy gold to secure your portfolio against the end of the times, the volcano going off, Yellowstone blowing, no matter what CJ Box says about it. That's why you go to Birch Gold. You buy gold, physical gold from them, and you put it in your safety deposit box. Or if you want to use 10% of your IRA, maybe a little bit more, you ask them to send you the rollover kit, which they'll do for free at hughgold.com, or text Hugh to 474747. And the reason you do that is because things are strange in the world right now in financial markets. And the 10-year Treasury last night went to 1.3%. Now you say, well, that's really low compared to historical rates. Yes, it is. It's also 100% plus what it was 4 months ago. So it went down to 0.65, and it is now at 1.3. So if in another 6 months it's at 2.6, and in another 6 months extrapolate, what's it then? No, it's not at 3.9, it's at 5.2. So if every 6 months the 10-year doubles, we will be back at the inflationary spiral that I talk about. And I know Janet Yellen says not to worry. I know Joe Biden says not to worry. Everybody on the president's team says not to worry. Inflation's not coming back. Okay, I'm worried. That's why you and I need to go back to Birch Gold via hughgold.com or by texting my name, Hugh, to 474747. Dow went up 64 points yesterday. NASDAQ went down 47. S&P went down 2 points. And this morning in Europe, England and Germany are both off. Germany more than England, but it suggests that today will be a rough day for American markets as they come to grips, I think, with the fact that we got a winter storm here. What is oil at, by the way? Oil's up to $60 a barrel. Meanwhile, back to the rundown. School reopening pits parents against teachers. Is there a word beyond frustrating? Long story in the Wall Street Journal about parents in open revolt. Look, listen to me. All you have to do is never vote for anyone who's an incumbent on a school board again. You might take out some good ones, but mostly you'll take out bad ones, and then they insist that they change up superintendents. So every superintendent driving to work, you might be a great superintendent. If your school isn't open, you need to be out on your butt. It is that simple. It is that simple. If a school is not reopened, everybody on that school district should be fired, everyone on the board, and the superintendent should be fired too. It's just that simple. If it's not we got no, spare me. Science is in. The science is in. You need to go because you are in the control of the teacher union. You don't care about the kids. Jus in Detroit. Good morning, Jus.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. How you doing?
Good, but you got 20 seconds.
Ted Lasso is what you were calling about. The wife and I fired up the Apple and watched the first 2 episodes last night.
And?
I like it. It's going to be addictive. I can see binge watching it.
It's going to be it gets better every time. Exponential growth in addiction to Ted Lasso. I am the Ted Lasso of talk radio, so I should know. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Just the comments of Democrats over the last 4 years justifying violence, and there is no comparable comment from the president, President Trump, that is. Just that alone shows, I mean, hypocrisy doesn't quite do it. And yet I get emails, and it's terrific for me to get emails from people who can't stand me. It's very important to me to hear how their minds operate, to read how their minds operate, to be precise. It's an insurrection. So I just had in front of me the article from Wisconsin. This took place when was that? 2011, yeah. Nancy Pelosi praised unionists storming Wisconsin state capitol. Democrats were for occupying capitals before they were against it. Yeah, that's quite something. And they took over the place for months. The capitol, the state capitol. She praised them. She didn't call it an insurrection. She praised them. But they own the language, do you understand? Because they own the media. They're indistinguishable. You would not know any possible difference between or among them. LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times, USA Today, they rival one another. It's a competition. Who can be more extreme? Who can pervert the news more effectively?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So we have an admission of culpability. We have 14,000 dead in the homes. Where do New Yorkers go next who lost a husband, a wife? What's the next step, Congressman?
I would say a few things. One is you have law enforcement, you have prosecutors at other levels of government that could take action. That's the first thing. Right. Secondly, the New York Republican congressional delegations, and our numbers are increasing. Claudia Tenney won her, was finally certified the winner of her race and was sworn in this past week. 8 of us today sent a letter to the Department of Justice with regards to this obstruction of justice case that's emerging, calling on the Department of Justice to investigate this charge. Now, you have a confirmation hearing that's coming up. Merrick Garland, the nominee to be the next Attorney General. Right. Inside of that confirmation hearing is a great opportunity for senators to maybe ask about this letter, or put aside my letter that was sent with my colleagues today, just asking about the underlying issue, and you can't allow, with all these different confirmation hearings, the person who's answering your question to just not give you any answer on any of this. We need to get assurances that something like this is going to be pursued. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for a member of Congress. You're doing it for those thousands of families.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline in USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Chad the Elder, who is up in Minnesota, he has a giant poster of Anne Murray in his basement. Been there ever since first time I went there. I've been thinking about Chad because there's a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. That is actually, it's in the, where is that story? It's in the New York Times. With indoor rinks closed, players turn to speakeasy hockey. In barns and barnyards, outdoor rinks built with kits or from scratch are filling a void for hockey players amid pandemic-related closures. Now, Chad the Elder's had one of these illegal rinks in his backyard for many, many years, and is commissioner of hockey, which Tim Pawlenty named me in 2002, and it's a for-life title like Warden of the Collegiate Peaks. In fact, I believe it's like British titles that descend. Hewitt the Elder will be commissioner of the Warden Peaks, and Hewitt the Younger will be the commissioner of hockey. And so I just thought of Chad, and then Anne Murray came up, and I remembered, got the poster of Anne Murray in his basement. Tina in Philadelphia, how are you, Tina?
I'm good, Hugh. Thank you.
Good morning.
I enjoy your show good morning. I enjoy your show every morning. I listen to it.
Thank you.
I'm calling about Ted Lasso.
And?
There's so much. Well, I really liked it. There's so much bad news in this world. It was a pleasure to sit down and watch an uncomplicated, feel-good comedy.
A feel-good comedy about good people or people getting better, actually. No one's good. Everybody's getting better.
Good people, everybody getting better, and he brings generations together, the adults and the kids in the show. I really enjoy it.
And I thought a lot about it over this weekend, why its appeal is so immense and addictive. There is no anti-hero. There is only people getting better than they were the episode before. And they're complicated people. This is not cartoons, but he's a complicated person. I didn't realize he'd begun as a pitch for American soccer. Little tiny Jason Sudeikis did this for American soccer, trying to get people to watch it. And a football coach from Wichita State, which is a joke within a joke because there hasn't been a Wichita State program for a long time. But honestly, when you got a breakout hit, you got to study what is it about the culture that makes it a breakout hit. And by the way, have you watched Big Sky yet?
No, I haven't.
Don't do it. Actually, people might like it if you love serial murders and trucks. Do you like serial murderers and trucks?
No, not really.
Okay, it's not for you. Tina, thank you. Michael in Omaha, Nebraska, 1-800-520-1234. Good morning, Michael.
Hugh, so I'm surprised that being a Cleveland Indians fan, you haven't mentioned the fact that if you watch Ted Lasso, within the first 10 minutes, you're thinking to yourself, oh, this is just a remake of Major League.
Well, it is a remake of Major League.
But it's not,
It starts with the premise.
Right, it totally does. You think, okay, I know what this show is going to be, and then it totally takes a left turn, and it's not bad at all.
And so have you watched the whole first season?
Loved it. It's delightful.
Now, give me your demographic. How old are you, Michael?
I am in my 40s.
Okay, so I've had people call up now from younger than you to my age, which is 64 and just short of vaccine eligibility. That's how I say my birthday's next week. And I know that it crosses all demographics, ages, and genders, because I watched it with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, who has not laughed as hard since Jim Carrey as Ace Ventura Pet Detective. I honestly, she very rarely, fetching Mrs. Hewitt's humor is Ace Ventura. We went and saw that because the Steinbeck house was closed in Salinas. So this was years ago, whenever it was out. So we drove to a theater and we watched it, and she embarrassed me. She laughed so loud. And the next time she laughed that loud was in the trailer for Zoo Cop or whatever it was, where the gorilla went to TGFI Fridays and said, "No kidding." And that's the kind of humor that the fetching Mrs. Hewitt loves. And so she laughs so hard through this movie, through this series. If she gets the joke, everybody gets the joke, and it's not a joke. Why does it appeal, Michael?
Jason Sudeikis inhabits that character very similarly to how Will Ferrell inhabits Ron Burgundy. I mean, there's a certain thing about how he has honed in on that character so hard and never breaks character, and it's just such a winning character, and he's so positive, yet he deals with things in life like his divorce that are hard to deal with, and it's perfect. It's a perfect show.
No spoilers from you, but it deals with panic attacks and addiction and aging and youth being arrogant and disappointment and hurt and grade A, you know what's inhabiting your life. And I love the fact that the fans hate him. I just love that. It's sort of like Dwayne. When we go anywhere with Dwayne, the fans use the W word, which I won't use on the road, on the air. But that's what they do when Dwayne comes up into a show. So, Michael, thank you. Do you watch the the Big Sky?
That's not my speed.
Yeah, you're not into trucker serial murderers?
Not recently, no.
Okay, I'm just saying because Chuck Box wrote me last night and he said, I'll bet you there are more people who listen to the Hugh Hewitt show than who watch Big Sky than have watched Ted Lasso. And thus far, I'm not screening calls. Thus far, he's wrong. And I think it's because I'm the Ted Lasso of talk radio. Would you agree with that?
Oh, you totally are.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just because that's where you come to get upbeat in the morning. Hey, Michael, thank you, my friend. 1-800-520-1234. Got to get to Joe Biden. Sorry, I have to do it. Joe Biden gave a town hall last night. Oh, my gosh. Where do I begin? Okay, let's begin with your student loans, because it's 4.5 minutes of I don't know what, but this is what we're in for 4 years. Joe Biden on student loans last night, cut number 13.
I will not make that happen. It depends on whether or not you go to a private university or a public university. It depends on the idea that I say to a community, I'm going to forgive the debt, the billions of dollars of debt for people who have gone to Harvard and Yale and Penn and schools. My children, I went to a great school. I went to a state school. But is that going to be forgiven rather than use that money to provide for early education for young children who come from disadvantaged circumstances? But here's what I think. I think everyone, and I've been proposing this for 4 years, everyone should be able to go to community college for free. For free. That costs $9 billion, and we should pay for it. And the tax policies we have now, we should be able to pay for it. You spend almost that much money as a break for people who own racehorses. And I think any family making under $125,000 whose kids go to a state university they get into, that should be free as well. And the thing I do in terms of student debt that's accumulated is provide for changing the existing system now for debt forgiveness if you engage in volunteer activity. For example, if you're teaching school, after 5 years, you have $50,000 of your debt forgiven. If you worked in a battered women's shelter, if you worked and so on. So you'll be able to forgive debt. Thirdly, I'm going to change the position that we have now to allow for debt forgiveness, because it's so hard to calculate, whereby you can now, depending on how much you make and what program you saw, you can work off that debt by the activity you have, and you cannot be charged more than X% of your take-home pay so that it doesn't affect your ability to buy a car, own a home, etc. Each of my children graduated from school. I mortgaged the house. I was listed as the poorest man in Congress for, not a joke, for over 30 years. And but I was able to borrow. I bought a home I spent a lot of time working on, and I was able to sell it for some profit. But my my oldest son
Screwing around here now. Okay, enough
after,
of that. It doesn't make a lick of sense. We haven't seen a proposal. Boy, the whole thing is that way, and I'm going to play more for you next hour. But I do have to get a little rant off my chest. The Los Angeles Times. I have a little service that tells me when I'm in the newspaper. And the LA Times has a television editor by the name of Matt Brennan, who's a pretty good editor, pretty good writer. But today he's reviewing PBS's new story about the black church. And it begins, at least since Orange County coffee clutches and erstwhile Southern swept Ronald Reagan into the White House. The Southern strategy, by the way, is Richard Nixon's, not Ronald Reagan's. Consuming political news in this country has meant confronting the seemingly inexorable rise of one interest group in particular, evangelical Christians. Even before the press corps descended on diner counters from Sandy Hook, Kentucky to Racine, Wisconsin, in their quest to understand the appeal of Donald Trump, reporters fanned out to Farmingville, New York, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, in search of the rank and file behind such figures as Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and George W. Bush. Okay, three very different figures who shouldn't be in the same line. PBS and the U.S. News World Report polled American evangelicals. HBO's Game Change attracted criticism for focusing on blind item salaciousness of Sarah Palin's disastrous vice presidential campaign rather than analysis of her appeal to evangelicals. And cable news network hired movement figures as regular contributors. A Guide to Christian Ambition author Hugh Hewitt at MSNBC and former White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders at Fox News. Number one, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is not a movement figure in the evangelical world. She is the former White House press secretary. And Hugh Hewitt is a Roman Catholic. I'm an evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian, but I am not a movement figure in the evangelical world. It's just as dumb can be. Moreover, this writer who is writing about a PBS series neglects to note that 25 years ago, I hosted Searching for God in America for PBS. 8-part series, PBS, Searching for God in America, that included an episode on the black church and the remarkable Cecil Murray. Dr. Cecil Murray, good friend of mine. And I just don't believe that people mail in this stuff. Matt Brennan, do your job. Before you just decide, I'm going to find a way to take some hits at the evangelical movement and I'm just going to make some stuff up. Do they not have editors at the Los Angeles Times? Do they? Well, they actually, I know that. They do have editors. They don't do any work. And Del Wilbur, if you're listening, this is why I don't subscribe to the LA Times. Now, I do subscribe to ReliefFactor.com. You could actually say I'm a movement figure in the ReliefFactor.com, though they're a sponsor of the show, because I take it every day. I did not do anything yesterday because I had a long 8.5 miler on President's Day. So take a day off after that. But got my 4-year-old. Down the hatch they go. I carry it in Kirkham Inwards, Veritron Omega every day in the first hour. I'll remind you 2 more times. Remember, put a bag of it in your car. Put a bag of it in your car. And the reason is, then you will not say to yourself when your butt or your leg or your knee or your ankle begins to hurt in your hour-long commute, I wish I'd brought my ReliefFactor.com. Hewitt told me to take it. If you have it in your car, you can lean over and take it. Doesn't give you instant relief, but you got to take it every day if it's going to work. 1995, go to ReliefFactor.com. Salena, Zito is next, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Liberal Justice Louis Brandeis said that states are laboratories of democracy, that we will be able to tell what states are succeeding and failing. Remember, what makes the American Republican system different, small r, not Republican Party, but a system based in a constitutional republic, is that the states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. That distinction is so incredibly important. We're a coalition of states. We're a coalition of sovereign entities that voluntarily agreed to a national compact. That is why those of us that are conservatives don't like the heavy hand of the federal government. We say, why does the Department of Education exist? Why do you need a Department of Labor when you have a Georgia Department of Labor? The federal government should be there for federal crimes, military, when needed, a social safety net, but really that should be left to the states. Interstate commerce, protecting federal parks and lands, protecting our borders, managing immigration, international diplomacy. And I'm sure there's a couple other things I can name that would probably the proper role of government, but that's about it. Most things should be left to the states for good reason. The Founding Fathers knew this. The Founding Fathers knew that as soon as you strengthen a centralized federal government, as soon as you put unchecked power into D.C., they're soon going to forget who they represent. You will live under bad laws, inevitably, if you lose a connection to the people who put you into office.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Now, my next guest is involved in the
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The only good news about the weather in the South is it proves that if the extreme left is right about extreme weather changes because of climate change, they're wrong about energy policy. And if the extreme left is wrong about extreme weather changes, they're still wrong about energy policy. Explaining that for us is Salena Zito, the maker of wonderful pierogi and prose from Pittsburgh. That's my new title for her, America's favorite yinzer. Hello, Salena.
Good morning. How are you?
I am terrific. How do you like that? Pierogi and prose from Pittsburgh.
I like that, but you forgot punchki, too.
I don't know how to spell punchki. I had to look up pierogi. Yeah. So tell people about why so many people are shivering in Texas today.
It's really quite sad what's happening in Texas. I don't know if you saw it, if anybody has seen any of the screenshots of the people. They're just lined up in these neighborhoods in their cars with their families, running their cars, trying to keep warm.
And we had two fatalities from carbon dioxide. You know, you never leave your car in the garage. People in the Midwest know that. If you're going to sit in your car for heater, you've got to take it out of the garage.
Yeah. They were going through neighborhoods, just driving along and showing these people in their cars outside.
Yep.
Well, what happened is that they didn't have enough power, enough electricity on tap to be able to handle the load of people trying to keep their homes, with putting the heat on, the gas on, the electricity on. And so they just lost power. They didn't have enough capacity. And it's really sort of, I think what strikes everyone so odd is that Texas is sort of thought of, no matter where you stand on the power on the energy issue, as this sort of muscular state on energy where, it's the home of oil and the home of gas. And yet it crumbled under the pressure of this big winter storm that hit them.
So Governor Abbott has called a meeting today to find out why the grid is not hardened against cold, and they're going to find out because it doesn't get that cold in Texas. In Ohio, and even down in Pittsburgh, which is a little technologically behind Ohio, they harden the grid against cold, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They figured it out in Pittsburgh, so I'm surprised they haven't figured it out in Texas. It can get cold.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, weather is unpredictable. Weather is, you don't know what's going to happen. And it's sort of, even think about what happened in California this summer, where they had all of these rolling blackouts.
Well, I loved the Babylon Bee this week that said people who move from California to Texas finally feel at home because they can't get any power. And that is absolutely true. But it is seeming to me for years, it's like having dump trucks and ice trucks, right? Sand trucks and ice trucks. That's what you do. Even if you use them 3 days a year, you've got them.
Yeah, absolutely. And smart cities just retrofit their garbage trucks and put the plows right on top of the of the garbage trucks, or the salt behind the garbage trucks. I've seen some cities in the South, like in North Carolina and South Carolina, who are doing that just because of the rare instances of when they get snow. You just, be prepared, the old Boy Scout saying, be prepared for what?
So, Salena, I have one question. The power grid fails in Texas, and it's Greg Abbott's fault, who's a Republican. The vaccine rollout fails in California, and it's the previous administration's fault because Gavin Newsom is a Democrat. Have you noticed how if a state fails at something, it depends whether or not the federal government is blamed on the identity of the governor?
Yes, it's absolutely true. Maybe even 10 years ago, people would have said, oh, come on, you're just pulling my leg. 5 years ago. Today, everyone is so sharply aware of the hypocrisy of how blame goes down, depending on if there's an R or a D after your name.
That's it. An R is a blame funnel, and a D is a blame dam. It's like you are invincible if you've got a D. Gavin Newsom, nothing to do with the COVID rollout. Greg Abbott, it's all your fault that the grid failed. It's just amazing.
It absolutely is amazing. And I think that what's important for people to realize is that Texas is a cautionary tale. What happened in Texas can happen anywhere. If these energy policies, these strident energy policies that want to remove fossil fuel from our energy supply, these things like wind and things like solar do not have the capacity, they do not have the ability to heat an entire city, or let alone an entire country. And as the one guy said that I interviewed, he said, we are a country that is very used to turning on a switch and getting power, or pressing a button and ordering something from our phone. We're not going to like it when we can't do those things.
Well said. As usual, Salena Zito. Her website is, of course, salenazito.com. If you want to miss a pierogi or whatever it is that she said, or other fine prose, go there, sign up, get everything that Salena writes at salenazito.com. Come right back. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show, straight ahead.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you see this ending? In other words, I fear that all of these ideologies are a snake swallowing its own tail. In other words, they basically destroy. They don't have the beginning of a clue what they would want to replace it with. Marxism, I really can't imagine what they're suggesting.
What they're suggesting is a woke ideology of so-called anti-racism that is a profound misnomer. That's really a profound race consciousness. And our institutions and our politics are downstream of culture, and they are destroying our culture one pillar at a time. And an extremely important element of culture throughout all human history is memory. It's knowing who you are as a people, what you're about, what your story is. And when Jesse Jackson 30 years ago had that ridiculous chant, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has to go, that was really the first battle cry in this fight to make us forget who we are. And it's not just forgetting, it's also lying about who we are. We see this particularly in the 1619 Project and its poisonous view of America that wants to make the American founding about slavery, when the American founding was an incredible advance in human civilization and enlightenment and liberty, and created in the North a movement against slavery that eventually would eliminate slavery in the entire country in the Civil War. But they want to efface all of that and build a new vision of America on the rubble that would be based on this left-wing ideology.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
It is dramatic footage, some of it very ugly. And why they didn't, in their opening statement, show videos which could have lasted all month of what the left has done to this country in terms of violence, riots, and killings is beyond me. I did not find one of the lawyers, I think the first lawyer, terribly effective, but I am not alone in believing that. As a general rule, in all of history, the good guys or the better guys do not know how to fight. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is. They're all horrified by the video of what took place January 6th, and horrify them exponentially by showing what the left did to this country while Democrats cheered, as opposed to Republicans' repugnance. That should be a point that is made there. You might as well use the national forum that you have, if indeed people are watching. I have no idea if people are watching. You have to be very, very interested in politics in general, or specifically in Donald Trump, to watch all of this. But I don't know. That'd be a very interesting thing to find out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
Who cares? They died. Remind you of anyone? Benghazi, Hillary. What difference does it make? It makes a difference. From the New York Post headline, Cuomo aide Melissa DeRosa admits they hid nursing home data so feds wouldn't find out. Let's ask somebody who's definitely got an opinion. Coming from hosting his own show on Fox News. Not quite. It was only a 25-minute segment, but it was fabulous. From Congressional District Number 1 in New York. Great friend of the show, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Welcome.
It's good to be back with you, Seb.
Congrats on that great hit. I have to ask you, I'm just going to be super cynical for a second. This is a guy who was given what? He was given an Emmy as governor for his use of TV briefings in his handling of the coronavirus. Now we find out they hid the stats of the deaths from the feds so they wouldn't get in trouble. Is Governor Cuomo ever going to face any consequences?
An Emmy, and he wrote a self-congratulatory book on leadership of his response, and he started selling this ridiculous poster. I don't know if you remember this story, but if you haven't seen it, it was absurd. Several months ago, praising himself and the response, and that when he says "who cares," what you think about are the lives impacted, the families, the people who lost their mom or dad, grandmother or grandfather.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt, the Ted Lasso of talk radio. 1-800-520-1234. Joe Biden gave a town hall last night, and honest to goodness, some people stayed awake. It's true, it's true, it's true. Well, Dwayne at least gave me a number of cuts. I don't know if anybody watched it. Did anybody watch it? Honestly, would you sit down and watch 2 hours of Joe Biden and Anderson Cooper? I don't know what the ratings were, but they're going to miss Trump because, well, let's just listen. First of all, Joe Biden on the illegal aliens, cut number 15.
Yeah, there's a whole range of things that relate to immigration, including the whole idea how you deal with, what confuses people is you talk about refugees, you talk about undocumented, you talk about people who are seeking asylum, and you talk about people who are coming from that are coming from camps or being held around the world. And there are 4 different criteria for being able to come to the United States. The vast majority of the people, those 11 million undocumented, they're not Hispanics. They're people who came on a visa, who was able to buy a ticket to get in the plane and didn't go home. They didn't come across the Rio Grande and swim across.
Can we stop right there? There aren't 11 million undocumented. They're between 15 and 20 million. The vast majority of them are not visa overstays. The majority of them are undocumented who came over the southern border. Doesn't change my position that almost all of them ought to be regularized, those who are not criminal. I'm one of the wets on this, right? And the British Labour and Tory party used to have in the Tory party the dries and the wets, and I'm a wet. Let everybody stay who's not violent, just build the wall. But I do believe that facts matter, and the idea that we got your refugees, we got your asylum, we got your undocumented, we got your camps. Dwayne, what is the camp reference to? Are there people who are playing a circuit? Well, because we got refugees and asylum seekers, I know that, and there are the undocumented, which are the people that don't come through looking for refugee or asylum.
Right.
Who are the camp people?
The camp people, I think, are the camp people. Are those the ones that are in the cages that don't exist on the border?
No, the camp people are something else. We could run it back. It doesn't make a lick of sense.
The camp people.
Okay, you go look that up. Let's finish the cut.
and sorry, it's the Irish in me. But all
go
kidding
backwards.
Aside,
he told a joke. We got to hear it from the beginning. Got to hear it from the beginning.
Sorry.
No, we didn't hear the joke.
Was able to buy
go back
the vast
a little bit
majority
further.
Of the people, those 11 million undocumented, they're not Hispanics. They're people who came on a visa, who was able to buy a ticket to get in the plane and didn't go home. They didn't come across the Rio Grande and swim across. Excuse me. And sorry, it's the Irish in me. But all kidding aside,
swimming across the Rio Grande is he shouldn't have said that, and that's an Irish joke.
We got to do this for 4 years.
Well,
we got to do this for 4 years.
We hope. I guess it's only 4 years.
4 years.
I know. I mean, the campaign was not that long ago. You remember what we did in the campaign. We had a Biden. He did this every day he was on the campaign trail.
4 years of Sisyphus and The Rock. Because I'm your morning guy. I'm supposed to bring you the news that happened last night, and the president is by definition news. That's why I would always read you President Trump's tweets. So let's skip that one. Let's go on to testing police. And I want Officer, our buddy, I want the detective to listen to this.
Officer Tom?
I want Detective Tom to listen to this. Cut number 16.
I think he needs
by
more
number
testing.
one, not defunding the police. We have to put more money in police work. So we have legitimate community policing, and we're in a situation where we change the legislation. No one should go to jail for a drug offense. No one should go to jail for the use of a drug. They should go to drug rehabilitation. Drug rehabilitation, number one. We should be in a position where we change the system of sentencing system to one that relates to a notion of, they should tell you that, is related to making sure that what you do is you focus on making sure that there's rehabilitation. The idea that we don't have people in prison systems learning how to be spending the money, learning how to be mechanics, learning how to be cooks, learning how to have a profession when you get out. The idea that we deny someone who served their time access to Pell Grants, access to housing, access to, right now, as you well know, most places you get out of prison, you get $25 on a bus ticket. You end up back under the bridge exactly where you were before. And the fact is that the concern in many minority communities is black on black, Hispanic on Hispanic, not just, but here's the deal. There has to be much more serious, how can I say, much more serious determination as to what the background and the attitudes of the recruit is, what their views are. There should be much more psychological testing, like you would if you go into the intelligence community. What is it? What are the things that make you respond the way you do? Because there is inherent prejudice built into the system as well. And we also need to provide for, and it's happening, more African American and more Hispanic police officers. Now, by the way, they don't get it all right either, by a long shot. But every cop, when they get up in the morning and put on that shield, has a right to expect to be able to go home to their family that night. Conversely, every kid walking across the street wearing a hoodie is not a member of a gang and is about to knock somebody off. So it's about education. I'd love to talk to you more about it because it is the answer, in my view, that and education, actually access to education. And one of the things that I talk a lot about, and I'm sorry to go on about this, but it's important, I don't think we can look at our opportunity in the, let's stick with the African American community for a minute, in terms of the criminal justice system. That is only one small piece of why people are the way they are. You realize, I don't know what home you live in, but if you go ahead and you want to get insurance and you're in a black neighborhood, you're going to pay more for the same insurance I'm going to pay for the exact same home. Your car, you've never had an accident in your car. You live in a black neighborhood, you're going to pay a higher premium in your car. So there's so many things that are built in institutionally that disadvantage African Americans and Latinos that in fact, I think, and one of the great advantages, I'm sorry, but one of the great advantages, as bad as things are, I keep reading from presidential historians how I've inherited the worst situation since Lincoln, worse than Roosevelt, because economic crisis, political crisis, racial crisis, etc. But the fact is that everyone's gotten a close-up look now and seen what's happened. That kid holding that camera for 8 minutes and 46 seconds awakened the whole world. When I met with his little daughter after he was dead, she said, "My daddy's changed the world." Guess what? Not only here in the United States, around the world, people said, "Whoa, I didn't know that happened." Dr. King, when my generation, when I got involved in the civil rights movement as a high school student in the early 60s, and you had Bull Connor and his dogs in the late 50s singing on those ladies going in their black dresses going to church and little kids and fire hoses ripping their skin off. He said what happened there was it was a second emancipation because people in places where there weren't black communities said, "That really happens? I didn't believe it." They saw it happen. And so it generated the Voting Rights Act, it generated the Civil Rights Act, and he called it the second emancipation. We have a chance now to make significant change in racial disparities. And I'm going to say something's going to get me in trouble, which I couldn't go through a whole show without doing that. And that is that, think about it. If you want to know where the American public is, look at the money being spent on advertising. Did you ever 5 years ago think every second or third ad out of 5 or 6 you'd turn on would be biracial couples? No, I'm not being facetious. The reason I'm so hopeful is this new generation. They're not like us. They're thinking differently. They're more open. And we got to take advantage of it.
I want you to... All right. Anybody out there want to take a swing at that, you call me. 1-800-520-1234. L.A. Police Department demographics. L.A. is 28.5% white. 35% of the police force is white. L.A. is 48% Hispanic, and the police department is 43.4% Hispanic. L.A. is 8.8% black, and the police department is 11.6% black. And the Asian population is 11.3%, and they have the most underrepresentation. They are 7.1% of the police department. So I don't know that Slow Joe Biden is back, America, and we'll follow him every day on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
One of the things I wanted to go through is how the Democrats tampered with evidence. And I was going through it with our team. I said, you do know that Eric Swalwell, who's a lover of Fang Fang, the Chinese Communist Party spy, he tampered with evidence. And David Schoen, to his great credit, came out and proved that point, that Eric Swalwell, and this is why this is not a trial. This is a Hollywood Broadway production. That's all this is. So in a real trial, you'd say, Your Honor, this evidence is tampered with. So you had Swalwell, the lover of Fang Fang, who came out and said that Donald Trump called for the cavalry to come. Cavalry. Now, anyone in the Christian world knows that there's a difference between Calvary and Calvary. I sometimes, without unintentionally, mispronounce one or the other, but I know the difference. Calvary, C-A-L, cavalry. One is where Christ was crucified. The other is horse-mounted military. So Eric Swalwell reads Jennifer Lawrence's tweet, who says, Mr. President, the cavalry is coming. So Eric Swalwell then comes out and says, well, on the House impeachment floor, you see here, President Trump, he was calling in for reinforcements, and the cavalry is coming. Now, to an untrained eye, you're like, well, there might be something, maybe there might be. It's nothing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm engaging in whataboutism. Here I am bringing up an example to show my point. I can't do that. It shows you hypocrisy, selective outrage. Hillary Clinton can parade around for 4 years and call the election illegitimate and say it was stolen. And nobody said, hey, excuse me, you're giving energy to Donald Trump down the road to say the same thing, so maybe you ought to back. Nobody said anything. You know why? Because they believed it was stolen. 78% of Democrats believe that the Russians interfered, which everybody knows they did and has acknowledged, but that they changed the outcome of the election. And Jay Johnson, the then head of the Homeland Security Department under Obama, testified there's no evidence whatsoever. We haven't reached any kind of conclusion that the outcome was changed. We know that no voting tallies were changed. They tried, but they failed. Yet 78% of Democrats, and they get their news from CNN, their feed from Facebook, New York Times, and 78% of Democrats have convinced themselves that but for whatever Russia did, Donald Trump would not be president, even though the intel community has never reached that conclusion. Am I not supposed to bring that up? It says something about your reason and your logic. I said that yesterday about the O.J. Simpson case. How do you respect a bunch of people who look at the same evidence of overwhelming guilt and say the man was innocent man who was framed? How do you respect somebody like that? How do you respect their judgment, their mentality, their ability to reason? Same thing over here.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. I know why it's cold in Texas. I do. Because my friend Christina is going to move to Anchorage. Christina is also known as Tiny. And I believe this is God's way of getting her ready for Anchorage. Now, my own personal recommendation, which she has rejected, is that she show her 3 small children the edge. I think that would be useful. Don't you think that would be useful? If you're moving your children from Texas to Alaska, just show them the edge. They're tiny, and we'll put them on their guard against grizzlies, which I think is important. Let me check the markets. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are lenders. They lend you money. And the reason you need money is because you're all on the move. According to Axios this morning, there are new superstore cities, top performing metro areas, the top 10 places where people are moving to. Provo, Utah. Palm Bay, Florida. Where is Palm Bay, Florida? I know where Palm Beach is. Where's Palm Bay? Austin, Texas. Salt Lake City. Raleigh, North Carolina. Boise, Idaho. Phoenix, Arizona. Nashville. Now, if I had a producer, we'd be playing Nashville Cats right now. Nashville, Tennessee. Ogden, Utah. And Huntsville, Alabama. This is from the Milken Institute. That's where people are going in 2021. Provo, Palm Bay, Austin, Salt Lake, Raleigh, Boise, Phoenix, Nashville, Ogden, and Huntsville. And so if you're moving, you're going to need a mortgage. And if you're going to get a mortgage, go to AndrewandTodd.com because they're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. They don't just talk to you about how they'll find you someone to lend you money. They lend you money. And they will assign you a team. And Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian have been friends of mine for 20 and 8 years, respectively. Andrew and I were in a Bible study for a long time. I know these guys very well, very, very well. 888-1172. They've done my mortgage. They've done my family's mortgage. They've done Generalissimo's mortgage. Everybody I know mortgage has been done by AndrewandTodd.com. So please call them. 888-1172. 888-1172. The mortgage interest rate this morning is based off of the 10-year, which has gone up to 1.3%. Now, that's not the mortgage rate that you'll get. It's based off of that. So I suspect we're out of the 2s now and into the 3s, but it depends on how much money you're putting down, how much, if you're refinancing, how much credit you have, how much equity you have in the house, what your credit score is. They don't advertise the rate because they're not fly by the seat of their pants. You know, I've seen so many. It always happens. I've been doing this for so long, 30 years in the broadcast business, and mortgage lenders are out there all 30 years. And they come and they go and they come and they go, but Andrew and Todd are always there. And some of them give you teaser rates. Oh, we'll get you a 1.5% rate. APR 403%. You know, that's not what you want. That means points bigger than the loan of the house. So you just want information. Call Andrew and Todd, 888-1172. But the rise in interest rate at the 10-year yield to 1.3, still great rates. Don't sleep on them. Yesterday, the Dow was up 64. The NASDAQ was off 47, and the S&P was down 2. The overseas markets are off 0.5% and 0.25% in Germany and England, respectively. And light crude's up to 60.79. So beware, beware. Back to the phones. Let's go to Matthew in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Matthew.
Good afternoon, or good morning, Hugh.
Good morning.
I had too much coffee.
That's okay, so have I.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the wonderful comments Joe made on policing, and I think he's missing one thing. He's got some decent points, and I'm not going to totally refute him, but I think the common denominator that him and Trump and even Obama miss is the common denominator of all these tragic shootings is nobody follows police orders, and there's a culture that says you don't need to follow police orders.
Well, there is a growing trend to front up police people. And if my friend Officer Ted was Detective Ted in the Bay Area was listening, he can tell us about it. But you're right, Matthew. Coming right back, America, Congressman Mike Gallagher joins me next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans, 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. Mm-hmm. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, mm-hmm. and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry. You think that's not a bad decision? The EDD, oops, we handed out $30 billion of money we shouldn't have. You think that's bad management? Schools not reopening. The list and reasons to recall Gavin, we have about 64 on our website, and we still couldn't fill it up, but recallgavin2020.com is long and endless. The reality is California has a bad governor making bad decisions, sending us in a bad direction for those of us that live out here. Mm-hmm. Our state's on fire, our power goes out, our taxes are too high.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
We'll move on to what is the main event at the moment, which is the radicalism of the Biden agenda, pushing a lot of stuff out unilaterally and also pushing a massive stimulus. You know, we all can agree, I think we need some more COVID relief, but it's much, much bigger than that, and has a massive national minimum wage increase that would hammer the job market at a time when we should be doing everything to support it.
It is almost as if, and I hesitate to say it because it doesn't sound sane, but it's almost as if they are trying to destroy the economy. It's so bizarre. Would you give them enough credit to say that they're not trying to bring some kind of socialism or big government dependence to us via these strange means? Because that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, that is what they're trying to do. I mean, it's based on a misbegotten but sincere view of what the country should be in their minds and how the economy works. But if you get closer to where you are in the world than where I am at the moment, a place like Alabama, the median wage is $15 an hour. That means, I'm not a statistics guy, but half of people make less than that. So what's going to happen to their jobs when you mandate that they all have to make $15 an hour? Well, they're either no longer going to have jobs, or their hours are going to be cut, or the employers are going to find a way to automate. So this just makes zero sense. I'm all in favor of a tight labor market. I think that was one of the beauties of the Trump economy when it was really cooking prior to the pandemic.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Just the comments of Democrats over the last 4 years justifying violence, and there is no comparable comment from the president, President Trump, that is. Just that alone shows, I mean, hypocrisy doesn't quite do it. And yet I get emails, and it's terrific for me to get emails from people who can't stand me. It's very important to me to hear how
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt playing some winter bumps. Joined by Representative Mike Gallagher, Congressman from Green Bay, talking about cold. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Hugh, cold. It isn't cold. It's summer, basically. We need.
That's what I told the second fastest man in Congress yesterday, Senator Tom Cotton, who was complaining about 5 inches of snow in Arkansas. I told him in Ohio we called that April. It's really just, some of these Southerners just do not understand winter.
I think it's why Tom has slowed down so much in recent years.
He doesn't train outdoors when it drops below 60.
Yeah, the cold weather really keeps you sharp. And, anytime Tom wants to come up here to real America, northeast Wisconsin, and get a run in, I'd be happy to slow down a little bit to accommodate his pace.
All right. Now, next question. Have you watched Ted Lasso?
I have watched Ted Lasso.
Okay, so how is Ted Lasso different from Matt LaFleur?
Well,
I'll give you the answer. Ted Lasso goes for the win.
Hugh, do you spend all week just waiting to just poke
Yes, I do.
Does Wayne get the task of come up with just the best dig at Gallagher and the Packers on Wednesday? How does this work?
I do.
What's the creative process?
I do. It's just,
That's the only part
Ted
of the interview he scripts out.
The only time of the week that I know what I'm going to do is when you come on the show. So did you like Ted Lasso?
I love Ted Lasso. It's not only very funny, it's surprisingly heartwarming, and I think Jason Sudeikis is amazing in it.
I think the reason everybody likes is that everybody in the series gets better.
Yeah,
everybody gets better, and
he
and
also
that's
does this riff at one point on the famous Allen Iverson practice speech, which is one of my favorites of all time, and I thought was hilarious.
Yes, there are many. The writers are superb, but we leave it at that. Let's get to the serious stuff. Joe Biden gave a town hall in your state last night. I believe it was your state. Do you consider Milwaukee part of Wisconsin?
I do, and I consider saving Milwaukee in general and Milwaukee public schools in particular from the reign of the teachers' unions to be task number one in Wisconsin.
Well, good. And Scott Walker's been out there saying that. I'm glad you have that position, but I wanted to talk to you about his comments on the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. First, let's go to cut number one, the president last night in Wisconsin.
I talked about it. I said, look, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So vastly overstated, the central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the way, he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms at each country, and their leaders are expected to follow.
What do you make of that, Congressman?
Well, in the first instance, I thought it was an example of what Biden was doing the whole night, which is rambling and failing to make a coherent point about policy in most cases. In the second case, however, if you take him at his word, what he's suggesting is that genocide, which is the official position of the U.S. government, that what is happening in Xinjiang province is a genocide, and his Secretary of State has said he's not going to reverse that policy, is merely a matter of a different cultural norm, which is, of course, absurd. In fact, the whole idea of human rights and why the United States plays a role in promoting human rights is that they are indeed universal and not obscured by cultural differences. And then the third thing, as we've talked about multiple times on the show, Hugh, is that I think this is our first big piece of evidence that the Biden administration is indeed going to subordinate human rights promotion to its broader desire to work with China on climate change. And that will be not only a tragedy for the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province, but I think a shambles just for our efforts to deter China by denial in the Indo-PACOM region.
I want to repeat that my prediction is somewhere in the middle of this term, we are going to see the Deputy Secretary of State emerge from a Beijing conference proclaiming that in exchange for our recognition of the 9-dash line, they will reduce carbon emissions significantly in 2080. That's what's going to happen. But let's go in the meantime to cut 14, the president last night.
There will be repercussions for China, and he knows that. What I'm doing is making clear that we, in fact, are going to continue to reassert our role as spokespersons for human rights at the UN and other agencies that have an impact on their attitude. China is trying very hard to become the world leader. And to get that moniker and to be able to do that, they have to gain the confidence of other countries. And as long as they're engaged in activity that is contrary to basic human rights, it's going to be hard for them to do that. But it's much more complicated than that. I shouldn't have tried to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television.
Congressman Gallagher, to become the world leader, you must gain the respect of other countries. I don't think I've heard anything as wrong as that in a long time.
It really is shocking and very troubling. I mean, I guess I agree with his last comment that he shouldn't be talking about China policy in 10 minutes on TV because clearly he's not capable of doing it. I think they have a huge opportunity right now, however, to repair some of the damage. And something I hope we explore in the Nixon Library seminar that you're going to be leading, Hugh, is the fact that we should pressure our allies to boycott the 2022 Olympics. We introduced a resolution to that effect last summer. My understanding is you had Mike Waltz on the show to discuss his latest resolution, which is similar to that. Because if you look at the record of recent Olympics, honestly, it isn't pretty. I mean, the CCP famously used the 2008 Olympics as a global coming out party. And in 2014 at the Sochi Games, Putin used the international limelight to whitewash the invasion of Ukraine. And so I think we have a goal. We have an opportunity here in a bipartisan fashion to use the upcoming Beijing Olympics to put some pressure on the Chinese Communist Party for their egregious human rights abuses. And I just hope the Biden administration doesn't go down this path, because I know there are good people in that administration that have a clear-eyed view of the Chinese Communist Party and recognize how disastrous this would be.
Now, the Congressman Waltz was on yesterday, and the way I understand the Waltz option is this. Either the IOC moves the games or we boycott them, and the we would be us and the Quad and everyone else we can get to sign up. And by the way, I think the IOC would fold and NBC would fold and all the sponsors would fold if it was move or lose the Western markets. But we need the Quad, India, Australia, Japan to join us. We need other freedom-loving countries to join us. And I think that would work. I really do think that would work. But the Nixon seminar, I do have to correct you. The Nixon seminar on national security and conservative realism will be led by Secretary Pompeo and Robert O'Brien, not me. I'm not actually a member of it. I just know the people who should be a member of it. You're a member of it. Here is Secretary Pompeo on Fox with Martha McCollum yesterday talking about the Olympics. Cut number 10.
The Chinese Communist Party is engaged of an effort to eliminate an entire class of people, the Uyghur Muslims. This is genocide. This is what we know from the 1930s. You talked about the Olympics in Berlin in 1936. We ought not afford the Chinese Communist Party this propaganda victory. And I appreciate these athletes want to compete. They want nothing to do with politics. They just want to be out there doing their best on the world stage. And I have great empathy for them. That's why the International Olympic Committee has a responsibility. There's still almost a year. We can have these games someplace else. I'm sure we can find a nation that would love to host it, a nation that would really uphold the Olympic ideals. That's the thing that I think the administration should be working on. It should be working with the IOC and our partners all across the world to say, enough. We're not going to allow this kind of bad behavior to be rewarded by the privilege, the enormous honor of hosting an international Olympic competition.
To make this work, Congressman Gallagher, to make Secretary Pompeo and Michael Waltz and you and Rick Scott and everybody else who's been behind it, would require Tony Blinken, who testified that there was a genocide underway when he was confirmed, to work the phones immediately and to make the declaration immediately, because you can't put on a game, or they could postpone the games a year, which, by the way, makes some sense since Japan is going to move to this summer, 2021, and therefore, if you wanted to go 2 years and go to 2023 for the Winter Olympics, that would make some sense.
Yeah, and first of all, I just think Secretary Pompeo really hit the nail on the head in laying it out. And my apologies for misspeaking, Hugh. I just tend to assume that anyone who's occupied the, dare I say, Olympian height of the Wednesday 7:30 Eastern slot on the Hugh Hewitt show tends to speak with one voice. So I sort of confused you and him. But I just think Secretary Blinken would find a huge reservoir of bipartisan support for that effort on the Hill. There are a lot of Democratic colleagues of mine, particularly on the Armed Services Committee, who are passionately committed to the cause of human rights, and I think would join us in this effort. And so to the extent that the administration is interested in this, I'm more than happy to work with them. And I just think at a time when we have officially declared that what's happening in Xinjiang province is a genocide, it would make no sense to support the Olympic Games being in Beijing. I mean, the Olympic Charter proclaims that the goal of Olympism is to place sport at the service of the harmonious development of humankind with a view to promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity. Well, that reality has been undermined by belligerent dictatorships such as the Chinese Communist Party. And the IOC has enshrined a sort of moral relativism that is deeply at odds with this charter of the Olympic Charter.
So do you think, last question, Congressman, you're on Armed Services with Michael Waltz. If you fellas bring this before HASC, the Waltz option, which is move it or lose it, would any Democrats agree with you to pass that resolution and co-sign with you?
I think so. I think we get a sizable chunk, particularly among the sort of younger generation on the committee. It would probably go through the Foreign Relations Committee, however, given just the jurisdictional and nature of it and the subject matter of the bill. But even on that committee, I think you would get a sizable number of Democrats. So again, I just think this is a huge opportunity for the Biden administration to correct some of the terrible statements that were made by the president last night in Wisconsin.
Congressman, great to talk to you. I need you to go get Matt Leffler to watch Ted Lasso, try and change that Packer culture around, believe, that sort of stuff, just believe. And I hope you can get that done up in Green Bay land. Thank you, Congressman. ReliefFactor.com. We got to send these to Matt LaFleur. And some people give out shortbread in the morning, like Ted Lasso. Hugh Hewitt, the Ted Lasso Talk Radio, gives out ReliefFactor.com to everybody he meets. And you will love it. $19.95, get you started, 3-week starter pack. And what does it mean? It means support for the relief of the minor aches and pains that accompany the exercise or aging that you ought to be doing or you definitely are doing. You're going to get older today. And as you get older, it gets harder to recoup the broken down muscles, and it gets harder to rehab and all that stuff. And as you exercise, you break down muscle, you rebuild it. ReliefFactor.com assists in the relief of the minor aches and pains. Coming up next, Josh Kraushaar, Hotline Josh. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So we have an admission of culpability. We have 14,000 dead in the homes. Where do New Yorkers go next who lost a husband, a wife? What's the next step, Congressman?
I would say a few things. One is you have law enforcement, you have prosecutors at other levels of government that could take action. That's the first thing. Right. Secondly, the New York Republican congressional delegations, and our numbers are increasing. Claudia Tenney won her, was finally certified the winner of her race and was sworn in this past week. 8 of us today sent a letter to the Department of Justice with regards to this obstruction of justice case that's emerging, calling on the Department of Justice to investigate this charge. Now, you have a confirmation hearing that's coming up. Merrick Garland, the nominee to be the next Attorney General. Right. Inside of that confirmation hearing is a great opportunity for senators to maybe ask about this letter, or put aside my letter that was sent with my colleagues today, just asking about the underlying issue, and you can't allow, with all these different confirmation hearings, the person who's answering your question to just not give you any answer on any of this. We need to get assurances that something like this is going to be pursued. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for a member of Congress. You're doing it for those thousands of families.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline, USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving riot. And then the vote was taken, 56-44. 6 Republicans joined with the Democrats in claiming that this show trial, this snap impeachment, is constitutional. Bill Cassidy, for some reason, out of the clear blue, last week he's on TV saying, oh, it's a show trial, doesn't mean anything, it's unconstitutional. But because he didn't like the performance of the president's lawyers yesterday, somehow he decided to vote suddenly that it was constitutional. But then again, that brings you to 6 Republicans, which means you're far short from the 17 Republican threshold to get a conviction. They've given away the ending. The vote yesterday sort of confirms that Trump will be acquitted, which will lead to the...
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined by Josh Kraushaar of Hotline Josh, the National Journal. He's over at Twitter. Josh, people want to talk about Trump and McConnell, and that was about as predictable as any sun coming up in the east and setting in the west. So I actually want to talk about your latest tweet, which is the biggest untold story in America. You quote a poll that teachers who are back in the classroom are comfortable with it. Parents are in rebellion. Democrats are getting hammered on this, and teacher unions are giving up public approval in yards and first downs and touchdowns in a way they've never been routed before. Are they aware of this?
Yeah, well, they are. And by the way, the poll you're referencing, Hugh, is not from a media organization, but it's from the American Federation of Teachers, one of the 2 biggest teachers unions in the country. And even their polling shows, and I think this is really important, that teachers who actually go back to the school realize that there's not a serious public health risk, that there's no issues, that there are plenty of states that have opened up safely, even in areas that have had some spread of coronavirus. And 2/3 of their own teachers, who are the most wary part of the public about the coronavirus, are totally fine with the public health conditions in their classrooms when they go back. So, I mean, there is sort of a game that's being played of fear and anxiety where unions leading the charge and trying to raise fear among their members that it's not safe to go back to the classroom when all the science says the opposite. And you're right, Hugh. The public is getting very angry. Parents in particular are getting very frustrated. And that's why you saw Joe Biden last night walking back his own press secretary's sort of lame benchmark of just getting schools open one day a week. He reiterated his initial benchmark of every, or at least a majority of the K through 8 schools 5 days a week in person. So, I mean, that's the benchmark he set.
The Jen Psaki, which I played many times on this show when she originally said it, was, our benchmark is a majority of schools being open one day a week. She said it. I replayed it 100 times. Yesterday, she said I didn't say it. Now, that's like Sean Spicer's first week on the crowd level. But she got a pass, Josh. Is that going to be the way it is with the press coverage of this White House?
Well, look, I actually think on the education front, and perhaps a little bit belatedly, but there has been pretty tough questioning. I just caught Kamala Harris's interview on the Today Show, and Savannah Guthrie was really pressing her on the issue of education and school openings. But the problem is that there really needs to be something of a sister soldier moment for the Biden administration. It's one thing to say we want the schools to open. It's another thing when you're a Democratic president and you get disproportionate support from teachers unions to stand up to your base and say, hey, Biden has unique power. He has a unique power in the bully pulpit in a way that Trump didn't, to confront his allies and say, hey, you guys need to get things right. You guys need to get a plan together to open up schools as soon as possible. So, that is the reality. They know the political pressure they're under. They're trying to kind of punt the football. They're trying to come up with reasons and bureaucratic arguments for why it can't be done right away. But ultimately, the political pressure is getting higher and higher. And even Biden realizes, trying to use spin is unsustainable when it comes to frustrated parents wanting their schools to be open.
But what I want to do is focus, though, on Jen Psaki and remembering the Sean Spicer example. Jen came out and said, one day a week in a majority of schools is our goal. Yesterday, she denied saying it. Does she get to walk away from the train wreck and pretend there isn't a train wreck?
Well, I was a little surprised, Hugh, that there wasn't any questions in the briefing yesterday about education or school openings. I would imagine that would change today, given what Biden said and given that he contradicted his own press secretary at the town hall last night. But no, there needs to be a high standard for people there needs to be in the Trump White House, and there needs to be that same standard in the Biden White House.
And so again, going back to the key part of this question, Sean was dragged daily. And some of that he brought on himself. We had a Saturday Night Live memorable feature that I used to talk to him about. Is Jen Psaki going to get SNL'd?
No, have they done a single sketch of the Biden White House, Hugh? I don't watch.
I don't know.
I've watched the opens the last since they launched after the inauguration. I don't think they have. They've steered away from politics. That's the problem. You've talked about this on the show. I think there would be a lot more trust in all of our important institutions, especially the press, if everyone was held to the same standard, was held accountable. That's the goal for any journalist, to hold anyone in power accountable. And
just one standard. My goal is one standard for everybody. One standard. What did you make of Anderson Cooper's hard-hitting, digging in responses last night to an occasionally confused president?
Well, I actually thought Biden did fairly well. I thought the town hall setting played to his strengths. So I actually thought it was a win politically for Biden. I would have liked Cooper to follow up a little more on the school stuff. Look, I think the reality is there's plenty of data, there's plenty of science showing that schools are safe. I would have liked to have seen Cooper follow up at the outset a little more.
You know what I would have gone after, Josh, is when the president let fly with, if China wants to be a world leader, it has to get the rest of the world to respect him, because that's how it's done. That's actually not how one becomes a world leader. It's not the question of respect. It's a question of power. And I don't know that he really understands it. Do you think he really understands that?
Well, he had a conversation for 2 hours. It sounds like he was playing the carrots and less sticks when he talked about his China conversation with
he did. It was actually kind of astonishing. Josh, thank you as always. Follow Josh at Hotline Josh on Twitter. Follow me to the next hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show coming up.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
It is dramatic footage, some of it very ugly. And why they didn't, in their opening statement, show videos which could have lasted all month of what the left has done to this country in terms of violence, riots, and killings is beyond me. I did not find one of the lawyers, I think the first lawyer, terribly effective, but I am not alone in believing that. As a general rule, in all of history, the good guys or the better guys do not know how to fight. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is. They're all horrified by the video of what took place January 6th, and horrify them exponentially by showing what the left did to this country while Democrats cheered, as opposed to Republicans' repugnance. That should be a point that is made there. You might as well use the national forum that you have, if indeed people are watching. I have no idea if people are watching. You have to be very, very interested in politics in general, or specifically in Donald Trump, to watch all of this. But I don't know. That'd be a very interesting thing to find out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
Who cares? They died. Remind you of anyone? Benghazi, Hillary. What difference does it make? It makes a difference. From the New York Post headline, Cuomo aide Melissa DeRosa admits they hid nursing home data so feds wouldn't find out. Let's ask somebody who's definitely got an opinion. Coming from hosting his own show on Fox News. Not quite. It was only a 25-minute segment, but it was fabulous. From Congressional District Number 1 in New York, great friend of the show, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Welcome.
It's good to be back with you, Seb.
Congrats on that great hit. I have to ask you, I'm just going to be super cynical for a second. This is a guy who was given what? He was given an Emmy as governor for his use of TV briefings in his handling of the coronavirus. Now we find out they hid the stats of the deaths from the feds so they wouldn't get in trouble. Is Governor Cuomo ever going to face any consequences?
An Emmy, and he wrote a self-congratulatory book on leadership of his response, and he started selling this ridiculous poster. I don't know if you remember this story, but if you haven't seen it, it was absurd. Several months ago, praising himself and the response, and that when he says "who cares," what you think about are the lives impacted, the families, the people who lost their mom or dad, grandmother or grandfather.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy, that was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Mike, what is the number one reason you think people in the state want him recalled? Is it his handling of the COVID-19 crisis? Is it the way he's been ordering, things like oil and gas leases and pushing a left-wing agenda? That can't be it, because this is a left-wing state. So people must be ticked off about his handling of the COVID-19. And Mike, if that's the case, then what happens when the vaccines kick in, and what happens when Governor Newsom begins to back down, as he's already begun to back down?
California has 5 million Republicans, 9 million Democrats, but our biggest problem we have out here is there's 6.5 million NPPs, people that just aren't paying attention. They actually tend to be conservative, and the one thing that's uniting the state, believe it or not, on the right and the left, is actually Gavin himself. The number one reason, if you were to boil into 2 buckets, is everything you said, but the reality is he's a bad leader making poor decisions, and COVID just amplified. We started this before COVID really hit the scene, if you will. This has just amplified the cycle, and things like dining at the French Laundry. You think that's not a bad decision? The EDD, oops, we handed out $30 billion of money we shouldn't have. You think that's bad management? Schools not reopening. The list and reasons to recall Gavin, we have about 64 on our website, and we still couldn't fill it up, but recallgavin2020.com is long and endless. The reality is California has a bad governor making bad decisions, sending us in a bad direction for those of us that live out here. Our state's on fire, our power goes out, our taxes are too high.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Eric Metaxas Show.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada, to my 400 affiliate special treat, welcoming back for the first time since he left his position as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson, renowned neurosurgeon, evangelical, inspirational speaker, and now the founder of the American Cornerstone Institute. The American Cornerstone Institute can be found at americancornerstone.org, and you ought to go read the vision and the mission statement. Good morning, Dr. Carson. Welcome back.
Thank you. Always good to be with you.
I am looking forward to asking you so many things. I want to start, though, with a newsy question. 2 of your friends, President Trump and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, are throwing bricks at each other. What is your advice to both men?
My advice is to take a look at the Democrats. They have deep divisions, too. and yet they have learned how to work together in order to accomplish a bigger goal. And, in the past, we've had Republicans and Democrats with different ways of accomplishing the same thing. Now we're dealing with something else. We're dealing with one set of people who believes in traditional American values and American dream, and the independence of people with a government there to help. And we have another group that wants a utopian society where you give all power to the government and the government takes care of you from cradle to grave. Those are two very distinctly different things.
Well, they ought to both be aligned on that. But right now, Leader McConnell has argued that President Trump is responsible for January 6th, and President Trump has argued that Mitch McConnell has stabbed him in the back. What do you make about those two arguments?
Well, again, they need to be able to look at the big picture. You can always find things to squabble about, but when you focus on what is truly important, and that is saving our nation, saving the liberty that exists here, the founding principles of our country, that's far more important than the little squabbles over these other things.
So should they desist?
What's that?
Should they stop throwing brickbats at each other?
Well, of course they should. That is a major problem in our society today. People enhance their own positions by trying to tear down others. We don't need to do that. Do you think that's
what Leader McConnell did, though, when he assigned responsibility for the January 6th insurrection to the president?
Well, obviously, it was unnecessary. There are plenty of other people throwing bricks. He doesn't have to do that. We all need to be thinking about how do we build this up. We need to be thinking about our children and our grandchildren. We're not going to have anything left for them if we continue to allow the very infrastructure of what is America to be torn down. Liberty and justice for all. One nation under God, living by Judeo-Christian principles. Judeo-Christian principles, what do they say? They say love your neighbor. They don't say cancel your neighbor. It doesn't say destroy anybody who disagrees with you. We are fundamentally going in the opposite direction of the founding principles of our nation.
So Dr. Carson, because I've heard you speak at Colorado Christian University and I've heard you use moral clarity often, what do you think happened on January 6th and why do you think it happened?
Well, again, we need to analyze the facts. The facts say that they knew that there was going to be violence and people attempting to do things that were very nefarious. And there was an attempt to get more security there. It was denied. We need to understand why that attempt was denied to get the kind of help that would be necessary when dealing with a crowd like that. And we need to stop just saying we're only going to investigate, one side, the other side we're never going to investigate. We're always going to give them a free pass. That's not liberty and justice for all when we do things like that. So
I know a lot of my audience are asking, though, Dr. Carson, and I want to go to the Institute very quickly. Does President Trump bear responsibility, large or small, for what happened on January 6th?
I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Could it have been handled better? Yes. If people had a retrospective scope and they could look back and do things differently, I'm sure they would. We can spend a lot of time ascribing guilt, or we can learn from things and move forward.
Does some of that blame go to President Trump that goes around?
I think when I say there's plenty of blame to go around, everybody has some responsibility there.
That includes President Trump?
Of course.
Let me ask, that's what I knew you thought that. I just wanted people to hear, Republicans have to be willing to say that. And I think they also have to be willing to say we lost the election fair and square, and we lost the election fair and square. Do you believe that?
I don't know about the fair and square part, but the election was lost.
Well, I'll expand on that, because again, the framers are as important to me as they are to you. And I recall never before the objection between the election and the transfer of power being as bad as this was, with as many questions about the legitimacy of the transfer of power as were raised. And I started calling President-elect Biden on day 2. Our framers would not go for that. What happened?
Well, I think the way the Constitution is written and the way elections are supposed to go was violated. There's no question that the legislators in each state are supposed to control the elections, not the Secretary of State, not the governor. People are not supposed to be making changes to the way that the election is done, just a matter of days or weeks before an election. There are a number of abnormalities. And if we're smart, we will fix those things so that people can have confidence in our elections. The reason that our country excelled, I think, is because of the power of the people. When we begin to deprive the people of their power because we have a system in place where things can be manipulated, it decreases the faith in the system. And that's a very serious problem when you're dealing with a republic.
That is true, Dr. Carson. But I think the job of a pundit is to be able to state fairly and with accuracy the position of the other side. And as an analyst, I would say, for example, Attorney General Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania would say, any objection to the changes made in Pennsylvania ought to be directed to the Republicans who championed those changes. And they made those changes in the Pennsylvania election laws a year before the election, and the Trump administration slept on their grievance. Therefore, they have no standing to bring that grievance. Don't we have an obligation on our side to accurately state what happened, which is basically Team Trump's legal team was lousy in the 6 months before and the 3 months after the election?
Again, I'm not sure that it does a lot of good to point fingers, but what we do need to recognize is that the system is not what it should be. And all of us need to sit down together and determine how can we have a system that is fair, equitable, apparent, very transparent, so that people have faith in the system. If we don't do that, we will see continued deterioration in our relationships.
I think you're right, but I think the ability to get there, and now we'll expand the conversation, is by being able to accurately represent the best presentation of the other side. So that when the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists argued at the time of the framing, they did so in writing at length and repeatedly in words that everyone could read and not via sound bites. So if the new institute, the American Cornerstone Institute, is going to succeed, it's going to have to be able to argue and articulate. Indeed, if you were sitting around doing a brain surgery at Johns Hopkins and you and your colleagues were disagreeing on which way to go, you had to listen to each other, didn't you?
Well, that's the problem right now. We have people in their respective corners throwing hand grenades at each other, and nobody's sitting down and taking the time to listen to each other and respect other people's opinions. And that's the only thing that's going to save us as a country. The vast majority of the people in our country are reasonable people. They will help somebody who's having trouble. They will help a neighbor. They won't ask them if they're a Democrat or Republican. But along comes the media, and along comes the politicians to stir up trouble and to make you believe that that person living next to you is your mortal enemy, who needs to be canceled, who needs to be destroyed, whose family needs to be harassed. Where did that come from? That is not America. And America is really more of an idea than it is a place. An idea about freedom and liberty and justice and opportunity. When we begin to destroy those things and we begin to try to micromanage everybody's life and decide what they can say and what they should think, it doesn't matter where that comes from. If it comes from the government, it's horrible. If it comes from big tech and media, it's horrible. It's horrible, period.
Dr. Carson, if you can stick around through the break, I would love to ask you another 2 questions. I got to go to the break. It's a commercial radio station, but I would love to come back. I'll talk to Dwayne about keeping you right there. Don't go anywhere, America. It's Hugh Hewitt.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Now, my next guest is involved in the effort to recall the governor of California, an effort that at one time seemed pretty fanciful, but no longer. You know it's getting serious when the governor's staff begins to call the effort a coup and suggest that it is being led in part by white nationalists. My guest is a vet of distribution, sales, and marketing, has served in senior exec roles at places like Corporate Express and Staples. He's now applying his expertise to state politics to create a team of volunteers and to create some sort of hopeful movement for conservatism in this state of California, where there isn't a single Republican elected statewide. Please welcome coalition founding member of Recall Gavin 2020, Mike Netter. Mike, how are you?
Well, Larry, I'm doing great today, except Gavin Newsom's still my governor, which I hope to change pretty soon.
You know, Mike, I've heard different things about how the recall effort is going. I heard you're just a smidge short of the signatures. I've heard you got the signatures. What's the truth?
Let me explain. We need 12% of the people that voted for governor last time, which is technically 1,475,000 signatures. We're actually at that figure, but before the public gets too cocky, because they have to be verified signatures, the reality is we need 1.8 to 2 million of them. The good news is we have 5 weeks to go. And you want to hear some more amazing news, Larry?
Sure.
This is not only the largest initiative in American history, this is 90% powered by volunteers, not by the big political machine.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Who has left the Housing and Urban Development Department and has founded American Cornerstone Institute, which you can find at americancornerstone.org. Dr. Carson, the reason I ask you to stay over, in the last month, for reasons that don't really matter, I've been drawn into the LA homelessness epidemic. 66,000 people are living on the streets in LA, and 10 days ago I was in Skid Row, which is the most horrific place I've ever been in America. I am curious, will the Cornerstone Institute put forward solutions on homelessness? Because, of course, the framers would say that's a local issue. But in Los Angeles, as you know, as the Secretary of HUD, it's a dysfunctional local government that does nothing for these people. They send them to Skid Row to die. Is the Cornerstone Institute going to tackle what I think is really one of the most pressing issues in America, what we do with our lost people who are being sent off to live on the streets?
Well, Hugh, thank you for asking that question. Yes, that is an area that we will be concentrating on significantly, recognizing that homelessness does not need to exist in this country. We have a lot of resources. You look at the Los Angeles area and the amount of homeless people there, which is accelerating each year, and the amount of money that is spent on homelessness there. It is an incredible amount of money. If it were used in an efficient and effective way, you could easily take care of the problem. But you look at all the regulatory barriers that exist there. By the time you get to adding those on, the costs are absolutely astronomical. The policies are not necessarily good too, because we have this, or they tend to emphasize housing first. Now, I like the concept of housing first, but not when it is done in isolation. It needs to be done with housing second and housing third. Housing second means you determine what caused that person to be there, and housing third, you begin to fix it. If you don't do those things, all you're doing is adding to the problem.
Now, Doctor, when you say housing first, people don't understand what that means. That means some people reject faith-based institutions' ability to treat the whole person, to present the gospel, to get them off their addictive substances, or to treat their mental illness, just find them shelter. And that's okay in some instances. But the
synergy for getting things done, and there's some wonderful models out there. Even in like Riverside, California, one of the churches we visited built 4 single-family houses on their property for homeless people. And all the members of the congregation worked together with the goal of helping those families to become independent. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference in people's lives and the quality of people's lives.
So the American Cornerstone Institute, people can contribute to it. How will it be run? Where will it be located? And what's its agenda going forward?
It will be located in Washington, D.C. My thinking was my tenure is coming to an end and I can retire, relax, and play golf. But looking at the direction of our country, I recognized that that wasn't possible. And so a number of people actually have volunteered their time as we're accumulating funding, and the funding is coming along very nicely. But we will be not only based in Washington, D.C., but we will be doing a lot of things around the country. One of the things, again, that I discovered at HUD is when you have these roundtables, these various forums, and you bring people with different ideologies to that table, but you put in the middle of that table the facts, the evidence, and say, let's solve this problem based on the evidence, not on your feelings, not on your ideology, and keep people to that, we're able to make a significant amount of progress. That's what we need to do in America. And that's what we're talking about when we say liberty and justice for all. We can't just take one group, the group du jour, and say everything's going to be surrounded around them and doesn't care what the fallout effects are to everybody else. That, again, is not America.
I want every listener to go to AmericanCornerstone.org, AmericanCornerstone.org, and join in Dr. Carson's effort. Dr. Carson, good to see you again. Keep coming back.
Thank you so much. Always good to be with you.
This is Lon Heechen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lan Hee Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.com.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a...
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Just the comments of Democrats over the last 4 years justifying violence, and there's no comparable comment from the president, President Trump, that is. Just that alone shows, I mean, hypocrisy doesn't quite do it. And yet I get emails, and it's terrific for me to get emails from people who can't stand me. It's very important to me to hear how their minds operate, to read how their minds operate, to be precise. It's an insurrection. So I just had in front of me the article from Wisconsin. This took place when was that? 2011, yeah. Nancy Pelosi praised unionists storming Wisconsin state capitol. Democrats were for occupying capitals before they were against it. Yeah, that's quite something. And they took over the place for months. The capitol, the state capitol. She praised them. She didn't call it an insurrection. She praised them. But they own the language, do you understand? Because they own the media. They're indistinguishable. You would not know any possible difference between or among them. LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times, USA Today, they rival one another. It's a competition. Who can be more extreme? Who can pervert the news more effectively?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Liberal Justice Louis Brandeis said that states are laboratories of democracy, that we will be able to tell what states are succeeding and failing. Remember, what makes the American Republican system different, small r, not Republican Party, but a system based in a constitutional republic, is that the states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. That distinction is so incredibly important. We're a coalition of states. We're a coalition of sovereign entities that voluntarily agreed to a national compact. That is why those of us that are conservatives don't like the heavy hand of the federal government. We say, why does the Department of Education exist? Why do you need a Department of Labor when you have a Georgia Department of Labor? The federal government should be there for federal crimes, military, when needed, a social safety net, but really that should be left to the states. Interstate commerce, protecting federal parks and lands, protecting our borders, managing immigration, international diplomacy. And I'm sure there's a couple other things I can name that would probably the proper role of government, but that's about it. Most things should be left to the states for good reason. The Founding Fathers knew this. The Founding Fathers knew that as soon as you strengthen a centralized federal government, as soon as you put unchecked power into D.C., they're soon going to forget who they represent. You will live under bad laws inevitably if you lose a connection to the people who put you into office.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Texas is paralyzed by a few inches of snow. Clearly not an Ohioan among them, but one Texan joins us now, Karl Rove. Karl, why can Texas not prepare for a little snow?
Well, because we get it so rarely. I mean, I can't remember in my many years in Austin that we had 8 inches in one day. So our power plants are not winterized properly, and in part that's a regulatory issue. In part that's just a desire to avoid unnecessary costs. But we're paying the price with cold. And I'm now on my 4th day without power.
Oh my goodness, you're down. I told Senator Cotton yesterday, who was making a similar complaint. 8 inches of snow in Ohio, we call that May. And so I'm glad that you are adjusting. Are you okay? Is everybody safe?
Everybody's safe. A little cold. I'm sort of used to it. I grew up in Colorado, Nevada, and Utah, so I'm used to driving on snow. But let me just tell you, not too many people.
Not too many Texans, no. Hey, I want to go to the Mitch McConnell-Donald Trump fight, but by prefacing it with these pairings: Huckabee and Romney, McCain and Romney, Bush and McCain, Reagan and Bush, Reagan and Ford, Ike and Taft. Indeed, I could go to Rove and Stone in 1974, college Republicans. The Republican Party has always been the UFC with pinstripes. Is this any different from anything we've seen before?
No, it's happened before. I think it was, look, Mitch McConnell had a responsibility to explain why he voted the way he did to his constituents. I thought that the former president, should have just let it be a one-day story. But instead, his speechwriters and wordsmiths cranked up a thermonuclear assault on McConnell. So now, rather than McConnell's speech on Monday being gone by Tuesday, we're now Wednesday morning, and we're going to be talking about it for a couple of more days, and it'll be all on the Sunday talk shows. And I thought it was needless. The president should have just let it go. He got what he wanted, vindication, but now he's declared civil war. Think about this. If he lost the presidency with the united party and all the powers of incumbency, how does encouraging a civil war make him stronger? And how does encouraging something that's not going to happen, saying Mitch McConnell ought to be replaced? Do you think Mitch McConnell is going to be replaced by his colleagues?
Not in 1,000 years. Most effective Republican leader of my lifetime in the Congress.
Yeah. So Friedrich Nietzsche and Kelly Clarkson are both right. If it doesn't kill you, it only makes you stronger. And the loser in this is going to be the guy who declared, I want Mitch out. And Mitch ain't going to be out.
So let me ask you about the idea of a split. I went back earlier today to Disraeli Salisbury in I think it's 67. They split in the Conservative Party, and it's bitter. It's deeply bitter. They're calling each other liars. They hate each other. 7 years later, they're holding hands, and they're running the world. Because winning overcomes everything. Will that happen in the Republican Party come 2022 and 2024?
Well, I think the difference is you had two relatively big people in the form of Salisbury and Disraeli. We know Disraeli more because he was sort of a celebrity of his time, a novelist as well as a politico, of Jewish descent, but an Episcopalian and a deeply Episcopalian Anglican England. He had an incredible relationship with Queen Elizabeth, which was known to the public, and so I'm not certain we've got the same caliber of statesman. Certainly, I mean, the statement yesterday by the president did suggest it. The Salisburian or Disraelian view of that would have been to probably make a snide remark at some proper club in downtown London and let it go. You want to strike when you can wound, not strike when you are going to lose.
Well, that's very well put. They would have done it in the Commons when Salisbury was in the Commons. But then, I don't know, have you ever read Andrew Roberts? I'm holding it up, Salisbury, Karl Rove. Have you ever read this book?
Exactly. I certainly have.
It is
I'm walking into my library. It was one of my first exposures to Andrew Roberts, who's now become a close personal friend of mine. He's a wonderful human being.
He was on last week. He's working on a George III book right now, and he's going to follow it up with Disraeli. And I don't think you can improve upon Blake's Disraeli, except perhaps make it more accessible to Americans. But that period of intra-conservative party fighting, from Robert Peel through the reunion of Salisbury and Disraeli, is what we're in right now. I just hope it doesn't take 40 years.
Well, I have a slight dissent. We're in something like it. But those were about big things. Those were about big issues, a different view of vital pieces of public policy. And there was a disagreement about the direction of the nature of the Conservative Party of Britain. But it was based around big ideas. And look, I understand we've got slogans, make America great again, America first. But, let's be honest, our former president is not a tutored conservative. That is to say, he's not been brought up by thinking about these big policy ideas. He basically adapted. His great successes were traditional conservative ideas.
Well, I'm going to have to file a separate dissent here, Karl. If you go back and read Salisbury, you'll see that Salisbury did not disagree. He did disagree on reform with Disraeli, but his antipathy for him was deeply personal. He loathed him because he believed he was without honor and a liar. That's why Salisbury loathed Disraeli. He got over it.
Yeah, well, I get that. But they also then found common cause in an agenda that allowed them to propel Britain forward in the last half of the 19th century. I'm not certain that I see Trump being capable of President Trump rising to that level of acuity. I don't know. We'll see.
Now, talk to me a little bit about, I've been saying, shorthand, switching metaphors, that Tom Cotton, Ron DeSantis, and Mike Pompeo are the Lincoln, Pompeo is the Grant, and DeSantis is the Sheridan Sherman of the Republican Party. They're the three fusion Republicans right now. Am I leaving anybody off of the fusion list?
Well, it's early. We'll see. The successful 2024 aspirants are going to be fusionists and people who are able to do three things simultaneously. Make certain that we keep that working class blue collar element of our party that's been growing for the last 25 to 30 years. To restore our strength in the suburbs to some degree and deal with an increasingly diverse electorate. And the person who's able to do that is going to be the person who I think is going to have the best shot at the 2024 nomination. I'd add Nikki Haley in there, but I still think it's very early and very premature, and we'll see how well they do. I'm one of these people who's going to withhold my judgment on and keep my heart from falling in love with somebody until they sort of demonstrate that they are capable of unifying us and doing so with touching, to different degrees, all three of those touch points.
Absolutely. I'm going to Switzerland because I want to do the debates when the Republicans line up in 24, and I'm not going to commit to anybody. But I do wonder about the ability to bring everybody back around the campfire, especially in 2022. By all measures, and you're the fellow who wrote about the great realignment of William McKinley. By all measures, we could be in a realignment that is being obscured by the result in the fall and by the invective between parts of the party against other parts of the party. The great realignment is the Latino vote actually got as high almost as George W. Bush, who was uniquely suited to the Latino vote. And the working class vote has never been higher. Are we in a realignment, Karl Rove?
Well, we might be. You're right. We saw higher percentages in all likelihood among working class blue collar Americans in the starting in 1896, running through the late 1920s. But there's a very interesting study out by two Johns Hopkins professors who say, you know what, let's not think that the problems with the blue collar working class people that they have with the Democratic Party is ended by the defeat of Donald Trump. In essence, they're saying this problem has been growing for a long period of time. Trump is the beneficiary, not the originator. And his disappearance from the scene, therefore, is not going to necessarily mean this problem goes away for the Democrats, because these are value-driven voters. They think the Democratic Party is out of sync with them. And guess what? I think that's absolutely right. You got some blue collar family in Ohio who's sitting there saying, we go to mass, we stand for the pledge, we put our hand over our heart, we think cops are trying to do the best thing they can to protect us, and we believe in work, and now we got a bunch of snotty-nosed elitists from academia and Hollywood looking down their nose at us from either coast, and we don't think that party that they embraces us. So
academia, Karl, not just academia, media, and that's my last question. Yeah. I have said to people the best media analyst is that analyst who is a partisan but who can accurately and objectively state with fair detail the position of the other side. Are any of those people left?
Very few. I read the New York Times out of professional necessity, and I'm just astonished at how often you get editorial comment in not in one or two paragraphs, but in virtually every paragraph. And no, and they're few and far between, and becoming fewer and fewer as they retire. And I was listening to one former Timesman yesterday who was talking about the kind of journalists that you brought up, and he was talking about them in the past tense, as if that all his associates from the New York Times whom he felt represented that kind of journalism were now gone or going shortly.
That's a sad situation. Karl, you always manage to do it. I appreciate your coming back. Keep coming back through this period of transition for the party, because nobody knows politics like Karl Rove. Nobody with a capital N. Thank you, Karl. Follow him on Twitter, of course, at Karl Rove. Hey, let me check the markets. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd, great sponsors of the program. They will finance your home purchase. And if you're going to be in a period of inflation, I think we're headed there. You don't want to be out of real estate. You want to own your home, and you want to refinance it for the lowest rate possible now. The 10-year Treasury bumped up to 1.32 while we were on this show. Started at 1.2 yesterday, up to 1.32 now. Home rates are going to rise. Go lock them in today. AndrewandTodd.com, or call them at 888-888-1172. Please don't get left behind. The market was up 64 points on the Dow yesterday, down 47 on the NASDAQ. The S&P was off too. Too early to say, but it's red over in England and Germany. But that 10-year interest rate going up to 1.32 in real time, I say to myself, if you need to refinance, if you need to buy a house, if you want to help your son or daughter buy a house before interest rates get back to the 5s, the 6s, the 7s, then do it today. Call Andrew and Todd at 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Don't forget as well, ReliefFactor.com. Relief Factor, another great sponsor of the program. I tell you about it 3 times a day. Put it in your car. Why? Because if you're in that traffic jam, a lot of people in Texas got stuck in the car for 5, 6, 7 hours, and there is nothing worse for the back if you've got a bad back, or sciatica if you got sciatica. There's nothing worse. But you can support the temporary relief of that if you're taking the right supplement, which is on Relief Factor every day. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. The one thing you can do is to take it every single day, and 1995 gets it done. Don't forget as well, honorboundcoffee.com. If you're one of my new affiliates, honorboundcoffee.com gives 100% of its profits to military families. So if you become a subscriber to Honor Bound Coffee, you'll never have to buy coffee at the market again. It's great coffee. It's terrific coffee coming out of the Pacific Northwest. It's the best there is. But when you get Honor Bound Coffee, you're also saying every dollar of profit from my coffee habit is going to support military families through wonderful groups like the Semper Fi Fund. So please go to ReliefFactor.com, click on the Try It 3-week, and then go to HonorBoundCoffee.com, subscribe there. And then come back. Eric Metaxas, my longtime friend, has got a brand new book out, Fish Out of Water. It's a memoir. We're going to talk about it next on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
is dramatic footage, some of it very ugly. And why they didn't, in their opening statement, show videos which could have lasted all month of what the left has done to this country in terms of violence, riots, and killings is beyond me. I did not find one of the lawyers, I think the first lawyer, terribly effective, but I am not alone in believing that. As a general rule, in all of history, the good guys or the better guys do not know how to fight. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is. They're all horrified by the video of what took place January 6th, and horrify them exponentially by showing what the left did to this country while Democrats cheered, as opposed to Republicans' repugnance. That should be a point that is made there. You might as well use the national forum that you have, if indeed people are watching. I have no idea if people are watching. You have to be very, very interested in politics in general, or specifically in Donald Trump, to watch all of this. But I don't know. That'd be a very interesting thing to find out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. My next guest I have known for a long time. I like to say I knew him before he was famous because we have a mutual friend, Jamie Bush, for whom my son is named and whose son I am the godfather of. And he said, when you go to New York next, you've got to meet with my friend, Eric Metaxas. And so I did in the lobby of the Harvard Club some decades ago. And Eric is out with this brand new book. I've got the reader's copy. It's not the way it looks in stores. Fish Out of Water, heavily thumbed and ready to talk about it, Eric. Have you got some time?
Well, I'll talk to my people. We'll see.
Okay. You know, with a memoir.
I'm so big now. I don't have time for this. But you know, Hugh, since we've known each other for a long time, I'm gonna squeeze you in.
Thank you. I want to tell people with a memoir, it's always dangerous because you can find one line in any memoir that completely misrepresents the memoir. Do you want to know where yours is?
I think there's 100 in mine. I put them in there myself. Go ahead.
Page 302. Quote, and so it was because of a drug overdose that I moved to Boston.
Exactly. That's exactly. You're very funny. You kill me.
Yeah, I want to start.
Predict that you have a future in this business, Mr. Hewitt.
I want to start.
That's very funny. I mean, that's brilliant. But yes, there's a lot in this. This is the weirdest book. I mean, what do you make of it? It's all true.
It is the weirdest book. The first college course I took, Eric, in the humanities, in which you majored, I didn't take very many. It was called Great Autobiographies, and it began with Augustine's Confessions, and it included Rousseau's Confessions. And I was reminded of both as I read this book, because the detail for past life reveals a lot about present conditions, right?
Well, that's interesting. Yes, I think that's right.
Okay, so tell people first what an earthquake in Greece in 1953 has to do with Eric Metaxas on Zoom and on Skype on the Hugh Hewitt Show in 2021.
I just want to make sure you can hear me clearly. I'm getting a fuzz from you, but here's the answer to that. In 1953, there was a massive earthquake in Cephalonia. That's one of the Ionian Islands off the west coast of Greece, where my family has been for centuries. Because of that earthquake, it really devastated the island. There was an immigration quota. The United States let in a bunch of refugees from Greece to come to the United States. My father, by the grace of God, was one of them. He got here in 55. He met my mother in an English class in 1956. She had escaped from East Germany and then came here. And I was raised Greek and German, which is one way of saying I was raised Greek. And that's a big part of what the book is. That's my father on the cover. My mother took the photo on a date at the Statue of Liberty in 1958. And so we thought it was appropriate to put that on the cover.
Are you aware of the painting approach called pointillist?
Yes.
That's what this book is. It's a pointillist memoir. I love this book, and I think Fish Out of Water is going to impress a lot of people because they're going to remember in their own lives the sort of detail that you recall about your life. And I'm thinking there are not a lot of German Greek families that are going to run out and buy it because they want to hear their own story. But I want to assure everyone their own story, if they are a boomer, you're a late boomer, is in this book.
I think that's true. And that's one of the things I say at some place in the book, that I wrote this story for you. I wrote this story for the reader. There are things in here that I know it's by the grace of God, in my experience, will speak to people, a lot of things. And I wanted to write something that was, utterly apolitical, that is a literary memoir, which will speak to people on the other side of the political aisle. In fact, I think I probably wrote it more for them than for people on my side of the aisle. And, it's not a book. It's not a spiritual memoir. It's just a memoir, but it has spiritual elements in it. And the ending, of course, is profoundly spiritual. But I thought I want to write something for everybody. And I want to indulge my literary side, which sometimes, writing a biography, as I've done in the past, you don't really get to do. You're kind of a little bit constricted. Not that that's bad, but I had some fun in this. And as you know, since you've read it, some of the stories are so insane and so funny. I said, I've been dying for decades to write these stories, to share these with people, because it happened, it's real. And I've been dying to put it in a book. So
well,
here
I'll tell you, it's quite captivating. And I think detail makes a big difference. I have been thinking since finishing Fish Out of Water. And remember, Eric, you've got to say the title of the book 7 times for anyone to remember.
Is the title Fish Out of Water, A Search for the Meaning of Life? I think it's Fish Out of Water, A Search for the Meaning of Life. I'm going to write that down and I'll repeat it.
Yeah, A Fish Out of Water, Search for the Meaning of Life. And it's got a Mark Halperin quote. We'll come back to Mark Halperin. But I am thinking of the bones of a man in a 12th century castle in Germany, somehow who never got out because he was stuck in by 2 little boys and their mother in a passageway that he couldn't figure out. Just the bones are there. And I'm thinking about the Cambridge police who are still looking for the perpetrators who crushed 2 oarsmen with the Harvard goalposts after the Harvard-Yale game in 1982. There's a lot of disclosure in here, Eric. You put yourself in harm's way.
People have not mentioned this. You're the first person. And I thought to myself, this is going to get a lot of attention because I say a lot of things in this book that people didn't know before. I tell some stories on myself. And, that's kind of the point of it. At the same time, not that many people have mentioned some of these things. And I will plead guilty.
When I read books, I read them carefully. And I don't know how to talk about Clarissa. So I'm going to let you decide whether or not to talk about Clarissa. I was
It's
taken up.
abortion. I had an experience